A boat captain at Crater Lake spent his entire career telling visitors how deep the water is. He never told them what's underneath it. Because 450 meters below the keel of his tour boat, the rock is still warm. The vents are still breathing. And the seismometers, brand new, just dropped into the caldera for the first time in history, are picking up earthquakes that no human ear has ever heard before. The official alert level is green, normal, nothing to see. But the geology says something else entirely. What you are looking at, when you stand on that rim and take the photograph everyone takes, is not a mountain lake. It is the throat of a volcano. A sleeping, hydrothermally active, magma-plumbed volcano with a lid of cold water sitting on top of it. And that lid has been quiet for 4,800 years. Which sounds like a comforting number, until you learn what it really means. Let's start with the size of the wound. 7,700 years ago, a peak called Mount Mazama stood 12,000 feet tall in southern Oregon. Glacier-capped, forested, bigger than Mount Hood, bigger than most of the Cascades. The Klamath people who lived in its shadow had a name for the spirit that lived inside it. They called him Lao, the chief of the world below, and then one morning Mazama opened. A single vent on the northeast flank cracked. The eruption column climbed 30 miles straight up into the stratosphere. Pyroclastic flows tore down every drainage at over 200 miles an hour, vaporizing the forest in front of them. Inside a few hours, the mountain had emptied so much of itself that the summit could no longer hold its own weight. 3,500 vertical feet of mountain collapsed inward. There was no peak left, only an 8-kilometer hole. Helens in 1980 ejected about 1.25 cubic kilometers of rock and killed 57 people. Mazama ejected 40 to 50 times the force. The ash cloud blanketed 900,000 square kilometers. 1 full foot of ash fell 300 miles northeast of the crater. 6 inches covered eastern Washington. Trace ash from that single eruption has been pulled out of ice cores in Greenland. That is the actual reach of the lid you are standing on when you take the postcard photo. Now here is the part the visitor centers do not put on the brochures. The Klamath people remembered it. They remembered all of it. In their oral tradition, Lao, the chief of the below world, fights Skell, the spirit of the sky. Skell wins. He collapses the mountain on top of a Lao, sealing him inside, and then fills the pit with water so he can never escape. 380 generations of human beings have passed that story down by mouth. And when modern geologists overlaid the Klamath legend on the actual eruption sequence, mapped meter by the United States Geological Survey, it matched. Not loosely, to the meter, the directions of the pyroclastic flows, the collapse sequence, the flooding of the basin, all of it. The oldest eyewitness account on this continent is a folktale that is also a forensic report. Now, here's where it stops being history. For decades, every textbook said the last eruption at Crater Lake happened 7,700 years ago. The big one, the mountain killer, that was wrong. The actual last eruption was 4,800 years ago. It happened underwater, on the east flank of a small black cone in the middle of the lake. A cone tourists photograph from the tour boat every single day. They call it Wizard Island. The last lava dome it pushed out is now buried under 100 feet of sediment and 1,949 feet of cold, dark water. Wizard Island is not a feature, it is a vent. It is the youngest vent on the youngest part of one of the most explosive systems in North America. And the rock down there is still warm. This is what almost no visitor is told. Crater Lake is 6 miles wide. The rim drops almost 4,000 feet to the surface. The water then plunges another 1,949 feet straight down. That is the deepest lake in the United States, the 7th deepest on Earth. The floor of that lake is the floor of an active volcano, and the floor is alive. The convective heat discharge from the bottom of Crater Lake ranks 3rd largest in the entire Cascade Range, behind only Lassen and Austin Hot Springs. There are bacterial mats down there, warm water pools, hydrothermal vents. The kind of features you usually have to dive in Yellowstone to see. They are just hidden under 2,000 feet of the bluest water in the country. Now stack the hazards. The first hazard is the water itself. 4.5 cubic miles of it, sitting directly on top of the magma plumbing. The last eruption was quiet because magma met cold water and slowly extruded. But if that balance ever tips at shallow depth, the eruption goes freedomagmatic. The water flashes instantly to steam. The blast goes up an order of magnitude. That is not an eruption you outrun. That is an eruption that vaporizes the rim. The second hazard is lahars. If a new vent opens close to the wall, the lake spills. Almost 4.5 cubic miles of water finds gravity. It picks up the loose pyroclastic debris still draped across Mazama's outer slopes. It funnels down the canyons toward Klamath Falls, toward Medford, toward the Rogue Valley. The third hazard is something even the scientists rarely talk about. A hydrothermal explosion does not need new magma at all. It only needs a sudden pressure release at depth. A steam blast on the lake floor would punch a column of boiling water up through 1,900 feet of cold lake and arrive on the rim with no warning at all. The fourth hazard is the one almost nobody mentions. A north-south tectonic fault zone runs straight through the western half of Crater Lake National Park. A magnitude 6 earthquake on that fault could drop a slab of caldera wall directly into the lake. A body of water 2,000 feet deep does not absorb that quietly. It would generate internal waves, surface seiches, and tsunamis that bounce off the rim and pile on themselves. So that is the geology. Here is the human cost waiting downwind. 712,419 people now live inside the prevailing ash drift footprint of the caldera. Klamath County to the south, Jackson County to the southwest, Deschutes County to the north, Lake, Douglas, Crook, Jefferson. The eastern half of Lane, Klamath Falls sits 56 miles south of the rim. 22,000 residents directly on the southerly drift line. Medford, 80 miles northeast, holds 63,000 more. And Bend, the fastest growing city in Oregon, sits 102 miles north with another 107,000 people. Now extend the line. Portland is 250 miles north. Seattle is 400. Both cities were buried under Mazama ash 7,700 years ago. Both were rebuilt on top of it. Combined, the metro corridor from Eugene to Seattle now holds over 4 million human beings living above the old ash bed. Not a single one of them was alive the last time Lau spoke. Now picture the boat captain again, late September. The end of the 2025 season, the last sailing. The dock smells like wet pine. The water laps the stone 3 feet below his boots. He has spent the entire summer telling 670,000 visitors that the lake is calm, that the lake is beautiful, that the lake is 1,949 feet deep. He has not told them he is standing on a vent. He coils the rope, flips the cleats, walks back to the truck. Behind him, Wizard Island is a black silhouette against the dying sun. The Cleetwood Cove Trail, the only way down to the water, closes for 3 years starting that season. By the time it reopens, the new seismic stations will have logged thousands more small earthquakes underneath that lake. None of them will be considered unusual. All of them will be the first ones any human has ever recorded. That is the unsettling part. We did not have ears at Crater Lake until just now. We have been staring at it for over a century, photographing it, swimming in it, writing poems about it, while it has been talking to itself in a language we could not hear. And now we can hear it. So what happens next is the part nobody can answer. The United States Geological Survey has not declared unrest. The alert level is still green. There is no evacuation order. There is no emergency. There is only a closed trail, a brand new monitoring network, and the longest period of silence in the volcano's recorded behavior. 4,800 years and counting. What the seismometers are picking up could be background. It could be the slow, regular breath of a hydrothermal system that has been venting heat under that water for millennia. It could mean absolutely nothing. Or it could be the opening line of the next chapter in a story that the Klamath people kept alive for 380 generations. Because they understood something the rest of us forgot. Lau does not need to wake up all the way. He only needs to twitch. So here is the real question. How long does cold water hold an eyelid down on a system that has erupted 40 to 50 times harder than Mount St. Helens? What does Oregon look like the morning after a single Wizard Island vent reopens underwater? And what happens to 4 million people downwind of a Cascade volcano that has been silent for almost 5,000 years when the last time it spoke, it became the second largest eruption on Earth in the entire Holocene? The deepest lake in America is not a lake, it is a cap. A cold blue, photogenic cap on a magma system that already erased a 12,000-foot mountain in a single afternoon. The seismometers are listening. The visitors are still photographing Wizard Island. And 450 meters down, in absolute darkness, hot water is still seeping up through the caldera floor. The rock is still warm, the story is still being told, and the lid is still on.